Craving fresh, made-from-scratch Mexican food that actually tastes homemade? Cafe Rio's got you covered. Every tortilla is hand-rolled, every sauce is slow-simmered, and every bite is bursting with bold flavor. Hungry yet? Don't wait. Order now at CafeRio.com. Build your burrito, salad, or tacos exactly how you like them, and we'll have it ready hot, fresh, and fast. Whether it's lunch on the go, dinner with friends, or a full-on fiesta at home, Cafe Rio always brings the flavor and the fun. So what are you waiting for? We've got you covered. Savor the flavor and order now at CafeRio.com.
You're listening to the Utah Checkdown Podcast. And now your host, Josh Furlong.
Welcome back to another edition of the Utah Checkdown Podcast. I am Josh Furlong, happy to be back with you again for another preview episode of Utah. So we're gonna jump in and obviously talk about Arizona State, a big game that's going to be here on Saturday in what's expected to be a pretty wet environment. At least that's on the forecast. And so, chaos, an 8:15 kick, a big matchup to really define probably both of these teams' seasons. Utah obviously needing to find a win over a competent opponent. I say competent meaning good. Right. Utah's done really well to beat up lesser competition, and so now it's a time to really kind of show that they are the team that they hope that they can be, right? You've got Arizona State and BYU next up. There's obviously still some other challenging games on the schedule, but this next 2-week stretch is going to be difficult, and if you can't get that win at home, I think you're going to see a lot more doubts about what this team can be. So it's a team that is, just on the outside of the AP top 25. I think many people think that they are a ranked caliber type team, but they do have to go against the defending champs, and it's not going to be an easy test against Arizona State, which comes in, pretty solid and doing well. So we're going to jump into that. But first, let me tell you about our partners, Cafe Rio. Craving fresh, made from scratch Mexican food that actually tastes homemade? Cafe Rio's got you covered. Every tortilla is hand-rolled, every sauce is slow-simmered, and every bite is bursting with bold flavor. Hungry yet? Don't wait. Order now at CafeRio.com. Build your burrito, salad, and tacos exactly how you like them, and we'll have it ready, hot, fresh, and fast. We've got you covered. Savor the flavor and order now at CafeRio.com. All right, let's jump into this preview. Before we fully get into that, looking at the injury report that dropped Wednesday night, the first one, not too many surprises considering, we've talked about this quite a bit. It's been 2 weeks of rest and all that kind of stuff. And so the biggest names out right now are Nate Ritchie. Everybody really expects that. It's one of those things that we've talked about. It's a surprise that it's not season ending, but I think Utah's holding out hope that there's a chance that he can get there. What that means remains to be seen, right? That could be bowl game. That could be Utah hoping that they're playing in January in the playoffs. That could mean in a few weeks. It's hard to know, and we're not going to get a lot of understanding there. I do know that he is still in a situation that he needs a brace and everything. So he's not fully out of the woods, but right now he's out, and we'll see how long that is given Kyle Whittingham's decision to say it's not season ending. Then there's other guys that have been on the list for a while, Paul Fitzgerald and Isaiah Garcia, that we just haven't heard a ton about. I believe Isaiah Garcia may be season ending. Paul Fitzgerald I haven't heard a ton about to know on that one, but we haven't been able to see a ton of that either. So not really a ton of impact players that we don't already know. Probable is Dallas Vakalahi. You saw him got banged up again against West Virginia. I believe there's a chance that he's going to play this Saturday, but anything can happen, and we'll see what these following updates bring and everything that way. So really curious there. On the Arizona State side, they're missing a couple players that have some starting caliber impact. I'm going to have a special guest later on in this episode, and she's going to talk about those a little bit more and what that means. I don't need to be there. and do that since she has more expertise on that. But for the most part, this Arizona State team is relatively healthy compared to where they where they could be. So you've got two teams that for the most part are healthy in their own respects. And it's definitely not the same as Utah going into the Arizona State game last year where Cam Rising tried to play and just clearly wasn't healthy, then gets injured 3 plays in even further and just complicates the matter. So you don't have that. One note here for Arizona State, though, is one of their wide receivers that they've expected to rely upon, not Jordan Tyson, he's their star, he's been playing all season, but a second receiver who they expect to be kind of that wide receiver 2. Jalen Moss is now off the injury report after an injury in the opening game of the season. Didn't really get a ton of touches, but this is a guy that transferred from Fresno State, put up a ton of yards there, was able to do really well, and they have a lot of expectations for what he could be. But in the second game, essentially the first game of the season for him, it's TBD on kind of what he could be. But the fact that you have him means good things for Arizona State. Not only do they have Jordan Tyson, but now you've got a second wide receiver who is getting a lot of billing in terms of what he can be. But can that connection with Sam Levitt be there, and kind of what's that going to be? So something to watch for. If Utah decides to go star coverage, put somebody like Smith Snowden on Jordan Tyson and try to lock him up that way, or put bracket coverage on him to try to make sure that he's limited. Does that open up things for Jalen Moss or other wide receivers? We'll see. This is going to be an interesting game to kind of figure out. If it is a rainy environment, does that impact things? It's tough to know. It could be a drizzle. It could be a downpour. It really depends on kind of what that means and how this game is going to be played. So moving into kind of what this Arizona State team is all about. So it's a team that they've dropped a game. A lot of people were expecting them to take a step back a little bit, even though they are the defending champions. And to some extent they have, but they're still a pretty solid team that has the makings of being able to compete for the title, right? We've seen that Texas Tech remains kind of that top tier team, the upper echelon team that's doing really well, but Arizona State is still in that mix, and this game serves as kind of the jumping off point for either Arizona State or Utah. You win this game, and not to put a whole bunch of pressure on this game, but it feels like this is kind of that point where either one of these teams can kind of use that momentum and move forward. Now, Arizona State and Utah both had byes. They're both coming off of wins. Utah against West Virginia, Arizona State against TCU. Different teams. TCU is much more of a competitor, so the fact that you have that gives a little bit more weight. But Utah is clearly in feeling good about themselves and kind of what they can do. So we'll see what that brings. But one of the biggest struggles that Arizona State has faced this year is in the red zone. They're getting into the red zone and they're scoring at a higher percentage than they did last year. So they're at 86.4% scores, but that is kind of nuanced in the sense that only 50% of those is touchdowns. So 36% of those is field goals. And so they've been settling a lot more for field goals than they were last year. Last year, for example, they scored 75% in the red zone, and 63% of those were touchdowns. So they were a little bit more effective there. Obviously, a lot of that had to do with Cam Scattaboo and kind of what his ability was on the field. Just a dynamic running back who really made the difference for this team, especially in the second half of the season when he kind of started to emerge and people started to take focus. And Arizona State's rise last year can be greatly attributed to that. And so there was a lot of conversations about what this team could be without Scattaboo. They've been pretty solid still without him, but I think it's stuff like this, the red zone issues, where you're missing on that, right? You combat that with their third down conversion rate, which is 129th in FBS. That's only 30.9% on third downs. It doesn't bode well, and I think that's a direct correlation with what Arizona State's facing. You had this dynamic offense last year that had a running back, an all-timer type running back who is clearly eating it up in the NFL now. You don't have him, you're going to take a step back. And they've clearly taken a step back despite having success in in the run game. So really curious to see how that goes. This is the point of emphasis for Arizona State as they go into this game, is trying to correct those red zones issues, trying to correct the third down conversion rate. But they're doing that against a Utah team that is only allowing teams 30% on third down conversion. They're the 25th best team on defense in doing that. And so, what breaks, right? Does Utah break? Does Arizona State stay the same? Like, where is this at? And so we'll see kind of what that means and how that goes. So looking quickly at stats, and I'm going to go through these relatively fast. I know, they're important and everything, but I want to kind of give this and then give time to the interview that we did. So looking at some standard stats, the clear point here is that Arizona State is heavily a run team. When you look at this, they run the ball about 54% of the time and passing the ball about 46% of the time. That's a little bit more than what Utah does. Utah's now about 52% run and 48% pass. So just slightly more. But both of these teams are putting an emphasis on the run game. And when you look at it, Arizona State ranks 20th in FBS in rushing at 215 yards per game. Utah's defense is only giving up 140. Where does that happen? What breaks down? When you look at Arizona State's passing offense, they're 89th in the FBS at 207.8 yards, and Utah's giving up only 160 essentially for 19th in the country. So, you've got two things here that are working in Utah's favor in terms of what they're able to do, but what's going to happen there. And so really curious to see what goes on. Both of these teams have great rush defenses. And so, can one of these teams break away? Can one of them really step up? So those are just kind of some of those standard stats. Looking at the advanced stats, this is where I think you really kind of get a picture of who these two teams are. And in a second, I'm going to talk about how important trench play is going to be, because I think that more than any in this game is going to tell the story of who's going to win this game. I think when you've got two teams that love to run the ball, that's obviously going to be there, but I think that's going to be the story of the game. So looking at this, Utah's success rate, I'm not going to define these things every single week. If you need to, let me know and I'll hit you up. But Utah's success rate is at 52%, and this is non-garbage time minutes, right? So stripping out any garbage time minutes, this is all just factoring in that. So we're looking at this. This is minutes where games actually matter. Games aren't fully out of contention for opposing teams. And so these numbers are going to be a little bit different than maybe the full totality of the game. But Utah is at 52% in success rate. We're going to avoid that slip up there. 52% in success rate, which ranks the 11th in the country. They're obviously most effective in the run, where they're 53.3, which ranks 10th in the country. Arizona State, their defense against, the success rate is 74th. So that gives some wiggle room in where Utah can be. Conversely, Arizona State, their success rate is much lower. They're at 43.4% for 69th in the country. We're really mixing a theme here. Most effective in the run as well, 49.6% success rate at 50th in the country, and Utah is 10th in the country in defense. So Utah is actually top 20 in stopping or limiting teams in success rate in both the pass and the run. So it's been pretty solid on both sides of the ball. Where things change a little bit for these teams is in explosiveness. Utah just hasn't been an explosive team. We've talked about this ad nauseum. Utah ranks 134th, and so it hasn't been great. They've been better in the run, but it's only 114th. Arizona State, they're middle of the pack, 80th ranked in the country. So they give up some explosives, but they don't at the same time. Conversely, Arizona State ranks 69th in explosive plays, and then Utah on defense is 117th. So two teams that are pretty similar. Arizona State a little bit more explosive, these more being in run plays. They've also had a little bit more of a tougher competition, so they've had a lot more body of work to kind of showcase some of this, and so there's some of that. Now, points per opportunity. This is another interesting thing. Both of these teams have had 34 total opportunities. This isn't necessarily a red zone stat. This is more kind of a full efficiency of scoring opportunities. That could be you crossed the 50-yard line. That could be just play or drives that essentially where scoring opportunity was available. Utah is averaging 5.0 points on those opportunities, which ranks 15th in the country. Arizona State at 3.56 points, which is 102nd. So Utah is being incredibly efficient in the opportunities they have. That's essentially what it's saying. Both of these teams defensively are equal. They're within like six grades of each other on that. So you're going to get a pretty even game there. But Utah has been far more efficient all around. So success rate, points per opportunity, that kind of stuff, that it's there. Looking at the trench play, this is where things really kind of get crazy. And generally, I would say generally this is in Utah's favor. Looking at line yards, Utah's offense is averaging 3.52 yards per touch, right? Or the offensive line is averaging that. That's 12th in the country. Conversely, though, Arizona State's defense is 12th in the country in limiting that at 2.3 yards. So really curious to kind of see where that falls. Arizona State on offense is 23rd in the country with 3.35, so similarly there with Utah. And Utah's defense ranks 16th at 2.34. So these two teams are pretty evenly matched in terms of line yards. Utah's got the nod a little bit in terms of what they've been able to do more effectively. And Arizona State's moving some things around on their offensive line that haven't worked as well, but they're still finding, production and getting players out there. Stuff rate, the plays that get stopped right behind the line of scrimmage or at the line of scrimmage, Utah's offense is only allowing 12.7% of their plays to be stuffed. That's 13th in the country. Arizona State's defense, though, is 19th in the country at stuffing 24.8% of plays. So they're getting after it. They're getting a lot of tackles for loss. They're getting stops at the line of scrimmage. They're doing well. Arizona State, their offense, though, is allowing 18.8% at 82nd in the country. This is a huge opportunity for Utah to get in the backfield, to be able to make stops, right? This is where that offensive line is struggling the most. Defensively, Utah ranks 14th there. They put up 26.1% of plays being stuffed. Okay. Then you look at havoc plays. Utah's offense only allows 9.3%. That's 5th in the country. They're not allowing the front seven to do it. That's at 5.9%. The defensive backs are only getting 3.4%. It's been pretty solid there. But Arizona State, their defense is one of the best in the country there at 5th. At 24.8% of creating havoc. So, really curious to see where that goes. Arizona State, they have allowed more havoc plays at 15.3%. So that's 70th in the country. And Utah's defense ranks 55th there. So really curious. I went through those pretty fast. I went through them fast, essentially just because I don't want to bog us down. But this is where trench play is going to be huge. This is a game where whoever wins the trench play is probably going to win, right? You can say that in a lot of games, but I think more than anything, this is where who gives, right? Who blinks first type of mentality. And if Utah can establish their, the way that they have tried to establish, I think you have an advantage here. Now, looking at this, I'm still not well versed in modeling and trying to create predictive scores and stuff like that. And so I'm using AI to go through a lot of these different things just to kind of get an understanding of kind of what things are being looked at. And the predicted score here is Utah by a touchdown, essentially 31-24. That's been pretty consistent with a lot of models out there that I've seen, whether that be SP Plus or some of these other models out there. The spread currently is 6.5 in Utah's favor. And so you're right there on that. That would be over on the over and under. So really curious to kind of see how this goes. But I think this is going to be potentially a one-score game. If Utah is able to establish its dominance, or conversely, if Arizona State is able to establish its dominance and do well, this could flip, right? Like this could absolutely flip. And I know that sounds kind of like an easy opt-out, but I think you're seeing a lot of these, these games that are going to be won in the trenches. So really curious to see how this goes. I love looking at these stats because you get a little bit more of a look into how these teams are outside of just looking at, this team puts up 215 yards per game, Utah allows this. This goes into a little bit more of kind of how those are created. So Utah has been a far more efficient team. They're doing well in what they do, but if they can't find other ways to be efficient, meaning if they can't find ways to get explosive plays in the passing game or whatever have you, then it becomes a real challenge. And so either one of these teams, they've got to find a wrinkle to be able to get that edge. I still think this is going to be a pretty competitive game and should be for a fun environment. With that said, weather causes all sorts of chaos. Penalties can cause all sorts of chaos, and anything can happen. So really fascinated by this game, but I want to get into our interview with our special guest. So before we do that, let me tell you about our partners, Canyon View Credit Union. At Canyon View Credit Union, it's on the house. Close a mortgage and get a free appraisal up to $600. To learn more details or apply, visit canyonviewcu.com. All right, joining me today is Michelle Gardner. She's the beat writer for the Arizona Republic. She covers Arizona State. She's been covering them as far as I can remember. It's been a few years. How long has it been now?
September of 2018.
Okay, I figured it was pre-COVID, but I couldn't remember how long it'd been. I've seen you for so long that I can't remember when you got there and when it all started for you.
You know as well as I, when you're on this beat, you feel like you age twice your normal rate.
Hey, I was in my 20s when I started covering Utah, so I'm in my 40s now. So it's been a hot minute now, but it's fun. It's fun. So just starting this off, I do want to ask you something, and you and I talked about this off of recording, but what is the difference that you view of a coach that allows you to watch practice as opposed to kind of what we go through here in Utah where we don't get to watch it?
So much can be gained, and we talked about this a lot as the media group when Kenny kind of went through his beliefs and what he would like to do. We kind of talked about this, and you get so much by watching practice that even if you're not allowed to report certain things like injuries or schemes or whatever trick plays they may be working on, it's so worth it to see everything behind the scenes, and not just schematics and who's hurt and who's not, but you can really see a team camaraderie, and you can see how well the players get along or don't get along, or how competitive are they. You could determine so much of that by being able to watch the players and watch their interaction with each other, with the coaches. So, sometimes in July when it's 118 here, we wish we weren't allowed to watch every single minute of practice because we're out there dying in July. But it's worth it.
Kind of with that, early on in fall camp, I think it was day one, honestly, of fall camp, Kenny Dillingham obviously is a very honest coach in terms of how he approaches media. He doesn't necessarily hold a lot back. And he talked about just how badly they came out of into fall camp, right? Like they talked about, I think the quote was, well, somebody's got to lose, why not be us? How have you seen this team grow firsthand? Like, how have you seen them grow, knowing that they are going through a transition based off of what they had last year? They're the defending champions. They've got that pressure. What have you seen from them from that time to kind of where they are today?
Well, that comment was made after they had like a bad practice.
Yeah, for sure.
And every practice is not that bad, okay? So, he's got to keep them humbled and keep them down to earth, and that's kind of what that was all about. When they have a great practice, he'll say, "Oh yeah, great energy today." So yeah, you just kind of have to. Everybody that knows Kenny kind of gets where he's coming from, and he's not going to let the players get too high on themselves. He just doesn't want to let them do that. So that's just kind of part of his stick. And, he's going to keep them grounded.
A lot was made coming into this season about losing Cam Scatterboom, right? Like, obviously that makes a ton of sense. He meant a ton for this offense. A lot of the games that they were in, I wouldn't say was all because of him, but he had a large part in it. Now that we're, 6-7 games into the season, or at least weeks into the season, how have you seen this team evolve from that conversation of Cam Scatterboom?
Well, Raleek Brown he's only leading the conference in rushing, right? So I think where they missed Cam is that 3rd and 1 on the goal line. It was very hard to stop Cam Scadaboo at the goal line. That just wasn't happening very often. So I think that is where they miss him more than anything else. They've got other guys that have kind of picked up that dynamic leader, alpha dog role. I think Sam Levitt's kind of got that alpha dog in him. But, Scadaboo, and I said before the season started, it's just going to look a little different. It's going to be a running back by committee. Now, it really kind of hasn't been a running back by committee, only because Kyson Brown was kind of slowed with an ankle injury, and he kind of tweaked it last week. In practice last week, he kind of tweaked it. So now I don't know what his status for the game Saturday will be. So it was supposed to be a running back by committee, and that position just looks a little different. And Sam Levitt's been running more, and I don't know you necessarily want Sam Levitt to run as much as he has been running. So the position just looks a little different.
Sticking with Sam Levitt a little bit, last year coming into the season, people that had paid attention to Sam Levitt weren't necessarily surprised at him kind of having the season that he did. Obviously, he benefited from Scadaboo, right? Like they have to complement each other. There's other players, obviously, on the field that help that. But how has he grown in this second season where he is now, he's got the confidence. He's shown that he's got the hardware in terms of being able to win the championship. He's been able to go toe-to-toe in a playoff game. Where is he as a player now as opposed to maybe last year, or has there been much difference?
Well, I looked at the stats from last year and I looked at the stats this year, and they're virtually identical. Like literally, I think it's a 20-yard passing difference. This year, he's got 8 touchdowns, 3 picks. Last year, he had 7 touchdowns, 3 picks. His numbers are very much like last year's. So in a way, that's bad because you would expect him to grow on that, and you would expect the numbers to be better because he's not a freshman anymore, and he does have the best wide receiver in college football back. So maybe you expect his numbers should be a little bit better. But we also saw with this team and with Sam, this is about the point in the season last year where they just got better and better and better and better. And some people were a little disillusioned with the loss to Mississippi State. I don't think if people look at it now, it's a bad loss, really, when you look at it. But I think that kind of took some air out of the balloon, of the ASU balloon, so to speak, and then they fell out of the rankings and whatnot. But then they kind of got it back against TCU. But I think there are some intangible things at work when you look at Levitt's numbers. I think that the offensive line has not been great in pass pro, and that's been a factor. So that's kind of led to him being a little jumpy in the pocket and maybe a little premature when it comes to running and tucking it and going. And also I think that the uneasiness with the upfront situation, maybe he gets off a ball a little bit sooner than he should, or throws a little more hurried than he should. I think that's been a factor. I think that the perimeter blocking by the wide receivers this year has not been as good as it was last year. And you have guys like Xavier Guillory and Melquan Stovall that maybe didn't have the production from a receiving standpoint that you'd like from your other receivers, but they were very good perimeter blockers. And I think this year, Malik McClain, I think, has got great potential, but it seems like he gets a holding penalty in every game. He gets a penalty for something. So I think the perimeter blocking's not been as good as it. So I think there are a lot of things that work when you want to look at a quarterback's numbers.
I want to get into the injury report in a second, but one of the aspects of that is not on the injury report is a player that has been out for most of the season, and that's Jalen Moss. He obviously, dynamic wide receiver, only played a little bit of the first game, but then got injured. What can he do to complement Jordan Tyson, as well as just kind of what it can mean for this passing attack, which hasn't honestly been as good this year, right? Like, I mean, their run game is pretty solid, but the passing game has not been as good. What can that do to kind of help this team progress?
Well, Marcus Arroyo and Kenny both said, we don't know. We haven't seen him.
That's fair.
We don't know what he can add. Potential, yeah, it's there. And when you look at it, they really don't have that number 2 receiver. I think, and again, going back to Sam Levitt, I think that he's got such a level of trust with Jordan Tyson. And I think he hasn't really found that with some of the other guys yet. So I think that Jalen adds another option. So we'll see. Again, they said that they really aren't sure what to expect because they haven't seen him out there really. But it gives them another option. He was kind of the number 2 guy in most of fall camp. They were also using him in kick return situations because he did that when he was at Fresno State. So I think it's just another weapon, but you're also talking, he's been out for a while and now Sam's got to kind of get comfortable with him. And he's got to, even though Moss was here, it's not like he just arrived on campus. Sam still needs to get with him in games and get comfortable and be on the same page with him. And we don't know how long that'll take.
No, it makes sense. I mean, I think Utah's in a similar situation with a wide receiver that came in, and Tobias Merriweather. He and Dampier just haven't connected, right? Like, and it takes time, and I think you're going to see that kind of chemistry develop as the season goes on. Now, with that said, you know, the way Utah plays sometimes, they let those types of players just kind of unleash and go crazy. So maybe you'll see a lot from Moss this week.
Yeah, and the other guy that we've been waiting for is Jaron Hamilton, the transfer from Alabama. And I mean, there's a reason his nickname is Turbo, right? So Sam did connect with him for about a 40-yard gain last game, so that kind of helped. We've been waiting for that. But again, even though those guys were here in the fall and the spring, they haven't had a lot of game reps together. So I think that is just one place where, you know, ASU has to be better. Sam's got to be better. And it can't all be all about Jordan Tyson, who is phenomenal.
It makes sense, right? You got to be more diverse than that. So that makes sense. But sticking with the injury report. So now a couple players specifically that are out. You've got Xavier Alford, who's, you know, potential starting safety. I know he's kind of mixed in at times. You then have Cyrus Fiesu. Is that how you say his name?
Fiaseu.
Fiaseu. Okay, he's a linebacker, a starting caliber linebacker. What did they mean? Is this a big impact for the team? Kind of where are the injury, you know, updates right now?
Well, as far as the guys on the list, those are the 2 big ones. Alford originally, I believe it's, you know, again, they don't say what the injury is. We can only go on what we see, which is another reason we like to watch practice. I think Alford's injury is a back injury. It was probably halfway through fall camp. He took a big hit and all of a sudden he was packed in ice from like right in the back area, was packed in ice. And he played the first 2 games, but didn't play great. And I think they just decided that's not something you can play through. Alford is kind of the leader on the defensive side. There is no doubt he's the alpha dog. Just from a leader standpoint, and I'll go back to last year in the game against Cincinnati just to kind of tell you what kind of leader this kid is. The game against Cincinnati is the game they lost without Levitt. He was hurt with the broken ribs that game. And Alford, as the team was coming in, stood at the corner of the end zone and greeted every single teammate coming off the field and gave him a hug, dapped him up, just pat on the back, every single player that came off the field, and he didn't come into the locker room until every player had left the field. That's your leader. That's your leader guy. But I have to say that Adrian Wilson, who is also called Boogie here, Boogie Wilson has been phenomenal. I don't think anybody imagined he'd be this good. He's got 23 tackles, a pick, a forced fumble, and a recovered fumble. You know, and that's a pretty good day's work replacing Alford. So, and I think, you know, Wilson will be the guy, assuming that Alford doesn't take a medical red shirt. I think that Boogie Wilson will be the guy next year. So maybe you got him in training. But that being said, Alford's got a play sheet and he's out there running the defense and he's out there talking to the safeties. You know, like he is like a coach on the field. So again, that's your leader. So I think that's what you miss. Fiaseu, they're pretty deep at linebacker, and The guy that's going to replace Fiaseu is going to be Martell Hughes, who's a sophomore. Very, very promising player. And he actually had a pick last week or in the last game against TCU that kind of preserved the victory. So they're deep at linebacker too, and I guess that's the good thing.
It makes sense. It's nice to have that consistency and guys that can help. So, really fascinated to kind of see how that goes for both of these teams. I mean, I think these two teams are relatively healthy compared to where you would expect them to be. And so really fascinated to kind of see how that all works out. Now, I can't remember if it was yesterday or today, you wrote an article about some red zone issues that Arizona State has been facing. In terms of totality, they're scoring at a higher rate this year than last year, 86% versus 75%, but there are far less touchdowns. It's turned into much more field goals. What have you found from this team? What has been the quote unquote issue with this team in the red zone?
I think they need better play calling. I love Marcus Arroyo, but gosh, how many times are you going to hand it to the running back and have him go up the middle? Like, that gets old. Okay, have Levitt roll out. How about an RPO? Like, let Levitt get out there and have the option to run it or throw it. It just can't be running back up the middle all the time. Like, I think that's the biggest problem. And they've talked about that. They've talked about personnel. Kenny said he's looked at both personnel and he's looked at play calling. We'll see. It's just the last two games should not have been that. The Baylor game should not have been that close. When you have 200 more yards than the other team and you are +3 in the takeaways, you shouldn't have to settle for a field goal on the last play of the game. That was just, there was no need for that, really. So I think that's a big issue. I think the third down conversions is huge. That's been a problem all year. Even when they're winning, they're not converting third downs. So we'll see. I mean, you can't, you get away with that against lower tier teams. You don't get away with that against the Utahs and the Texas Techs of the world. It's not going to happen.
I think Kenny I saw an interview with him talking about obviously praising Utah's offensive line and just being able to kind of say he doesn't want to go against two guys that are projected in the first round. When you look at this game, I've looked at a bunch of standard stats, advanced stats, different things about this. It seems like the trench play is going to play a huge role, and I understand that's important in every game. But it feels like with both of these teams, this is going to be very imperative because both of these teams like to run. This is their emphasis. This is what they do. They're both really solid in the run game. They rank really highly there. Has there been any conversation from Kenny Dillingham or the coaching staff, players, about kind of the importance of this, or kind of what do you see as this role being in this game?
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to come down to the trenches. And then ASU's kind of moved some personnel around on the offensive line. They had, and this is where when you have a guy at center like Ali Fautanu, who for the last 2 years was just like literally didn't miss a snap for 2 years, and all of a sudden he's gone and you realize what you're missing now. So they moved Ben Coleman to center and it didn't go great. Ben Coleman's a great guard. And I don't want to, the transition to center wasn't great. Mm-hmm. So after the Camp Tanazona scrimmage, when they came back from that, they started working with Wade Helton at center, and both Coleman and Helton were getting reps. And so they were trying to decide, do they keep Coleman at center or do they move him back to guard and use Helton? So they ended up going with Coleman. And now, lo and behold, in the last week, and actually halfway through the game, the TCU game, they brought in Helton. So now it's Helton at center, and it looks like it's going to be Coleman at guard. So we'll see how that plays out. I'm real interested to see how that plays out. Like I said, the offensive line in pass pro wasn't great. The center position's a lot when you're also, playing it for the first time, but you've got to make all the calls up front. Sometimes that's a lot to handle. So I'm excited to see if that makes a difference in the red zone issues. That change, what seems like a minor change, but it's probably really not a minor change, if you know what I mean.
Years ago, Utah had to go to the swamp and play Florida. And so they tried to do a bunch of different things to mitigate kind of what the humidity would be like, the heat, that kind of stuff. This week, and maybe it was some of last week as well, we saw, Sam Levitt taking snaps with a ton of water being thrown at him to try to kind of get that feel. Has there been any conversation about what that is and kind of the game plan there? Is this just something that they tried once? Like, what are they trying to do to prepare for what is expected to be a pretty wet Saturday?
Well, they did it all week. It wasn't just one practice. They did that every day in practice. And then Sam Levitt said, "Hey, I'm from Oregon. Is there a wetter state in the country than Oregon?" So he says he's good with that. I think that's one of those things where the more you talk about it, you put it in guys' heads that they should be worried about it, and you don't necessarily want to do that. So, I mean, they've done what they've done the whole wet ball drill, and you can only do so much, right?
It's true. I think that's what Utah found too. Is like if you just stick to your game plan. Obviously, you have to control for it somewhat, but if you stick to your game plan, you're generally fine. But it's just kind of funny to watch all these different things that coaches do to try to get that edge. And I understand it, right? Like you want to make sure your team's prepared because the last thing you want to do is go into an environment that's wet and you're like, man, I really wish we would have prepared for a wet environment, But
and they've done the extra crowd noise, the piped in crowd noise, and like Mississippi State week, they had cowbells. Everybody had cowbells, and like even the equipment managers ringing cowbells. Like they try and think of everything, but you can only do so much. But again, if you're talking, oh my God, it's raining. Oh my God, it's raining. Like you don't want your guys overthinking that either.
No, for sure. Well, I have one more question for you, and I don't like to ask the standard question of who do you think is going to win your projection that way. So I'm going to ask it in a different way. How do you think Arizona State loses this game?
Okay, there are three things I think that are huge here. One is the red zone issues and third down conversions. We've already talked about that. Two, the punting situation. Okay. I don't know what the status of this is where these stupid injury reports don't help you a whole lot. So their punter is actually Canyon Floyd, and he technically is going to play because he's the holder. So you can't say he's going to be out because he's not going to be out because he's going to be the holder.
That's fair.
But we don't know if he's going to punt, right?
That's quite the nuance right there. I love it.
Okay, so the difference is they've got the backup punter is a kid named Matt McKenzie that's an Australian, and he's the old rugby style rollout kid, but he's only been punting for like a year. So he's averaging like 32 yards a kick, and he can't flip the field. So I think that when you're looking at a game that's so close, those small things make a difference. So I think that is going to be the punting and the field position is another issue. And then I think the offensive line issue and how that's going to play out. So those are the three things that I'm looking at from an ASU standpoint of if they're going to win this game, they need to fix all three of those things.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy. It's never a dull moment on the beat. So tell people where they can find you, what you're working on, that kind of stuff.
Well, it's our website is AZ Central, and I got my scouting reports already posted. I did pick Utah, but I think this is one of those games that it's a one possession game either way, and I think just those little things can make a difference. And then, the other thing that I can say about ASU is, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, they haven't played a complete game yet. So they're 4-1, but they haven't had that game where everything was clicking, whether it's offense, defense, special teams. They just haven't put it all together yet. So I guess it's bad that they haven't been able to do that, but I guess it's good because they're still winning and eking out games when they haven't done that. So, but I think when you look at their schedule and what they've got the next month, and I know BYU's got a tough schedule, coming up, but I don't know that anybody's had a tougher schedule than ASU when you go at Baylor, TCU, Utah, Texas Tech, Houston, although, they were exposed slightly by Texas Tech, and then they got to go to Iowa State. That's a pretty tough road to hoe, even though you're the defending champion.
Who hasn't been exposed by Texas Tech? That's all the rage now. So,
well, you know what? I'm interested in, again, it's only one game at a time, and we get sick of coaches saying that too. But I can say that this is the Texas Tech game. When we asked a bunch of the players, like in the spring, what game are you most looking forward to? And you can't say Arizona because that's your rival. They want Texas Tech.
Oh, I'm sure.
Just because they lost to them last year. That was Sam Levitt's first, conference game, and they didn't play well. So they want Texas Tech. And again, there's a lot of bravado out there on the part of that team and that fan base for the obvious reasons. And so we'll see. But again, first things first, they know that they're going to have their hands full this week.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you on Saturday.
I will be there.
Sounds great. See you then. All right. Thank you to Michelle for joining us. Obviously, some great insight there on what this team can bring. She had a lot of great points there, especially at the end about the three things that Arizona State has to do to win. That goes back to what I was saying in the trench play. I really think this is a game there that matters, and it's really going to be fascinating to kind of see who comes out on top. So, we get to watch a fun environment. It's a night environment for Utah. This is what the fans want, and really curious to kind of see how this game develops. But it should be a fun one. If Utah wants to be serious in contending for a Big 12 title, this feels like a game that they have to win. Certainly not a must, but it's pretty much a must. And so you've got to be able to do that. You've got to be able to get these wins, knowing that there is some, more competition along the way, but you've got to be able to win the ones that are going to be like this, who are also going to be against competitors in the Big 12. So with that, we're going to sign off. Hope you enjoy your weekend. If you're going to the game, hope you stay dry as much as possible, and you enjoy your time. So with that, we'll sign off, and we'll get back to you next week and recap this game.